Today we're going to work on a sort of modified hollow fly technique that could be used to create virtually any baitfish. And the dimensions of the fly are controlled by the gap of the hook and the way material is applied using that hollow fly technique. In this case, I'm going to add a little bit of a weight with the bead, and I'm going to hide it within the design of the fly. So I'm just going to start right in with some thread, and this is a fairly heavy and very strong thread. And the approach here is to build up a little bump right about where the eyes of the baitfish would be, so that the inside of this tungsten bead will slide very snugly up on the bump that I'm creating. And you will see that there'll be a reason for that. Then I'm going to take a little bit of this Loctite 60-second universal glue and put just a little bit of it right on the bump. Make sure that this bead doesn't really want to go anywhere when I'm done. I'm going to wrap a little in front of it and a little behind it, just to lock it in place securely. Then I can take my thread and move right down the hook shank to a point just about where the point of the hook is. And I can take one material. In this case, I'm going to use a yellow because you can see it a whole lot better than darker color. And this is a material called DNA, which is a combination of colored fiber and flashy fiber. And it may not be available in some parts of the world. It certainly is not going to be available from what I understand anywhere fairly soon. And I'm just going to cut off a long piece of it. And you notice I'm moving the scissors back and forth as I cut it, and that's to create uneven ends. So it's more like a natural hair where the fibers are not ever really very straight. And you can uneven that even a little more with your fingers. And then using a tail portion that's approximately as long as the hook, you can tie this material in place as you would pretty much any natural material, and you can pull it around on the hook shank, and then you can fold it back and tie it down, adding more fiber on top. And then 3/4 of the way back along that length, you do the same thing, moving the scissors back and forth as you cut it. A little bit of moisture, and you can see I've created a taper. Moving those scissors back and forth as you cut it does that. It leaves you a nice tapered material. We can then move forward, repeat the same thing. Here you notice I'm pushing it right around the hook shank. And then folding back, keeping it on top, that excess material. So there's no waste here. All the material's going on the hook. And it's all tied down so that it moves freely behind the hook, but it really doesn't run a wrap. And it won't wrap around the hook shank very readily when you're using it either. Like marabou, when you're tying with it, it pays to use a little bit of moisture because it's easier to control. Now, take another bunch of the same stuff, The gap of the hook is what controls how much of this you can put on, because you don't want to obstruct the hooking ability here. So the point of the hook needs to be pretty much unfettered. We've worked on the back of the fly, and we'll do the same thing, unevening the material. But we don't want anything that, when we start moving forward, that is going to expand beyond that. So if we keep the material short from here on in, we can then position it so that it won't obstruct. And the way you do that is turn it around. Place it on the hook shank. And just because I'm using a synthetic material here doesn't mean that that's all you can use. It could be pretty much anything. Let's cut that off. And we can cover any multitude of sins by just adding material in as we need it. It doesn't matter if the material makes a lump or is unsightly at this point, because we're going to cover all that. We just take our fingers and push all of this back, and unlike the traditional hollow flies that are done by Bob Popovics and others, where the control of material is done by wrapping in front of it, building a dam, leaving the material free to move, we're just going to come back over it and take a couple of turns like that. And it pinches the material upward, creates a continuation of body shape, and allows us to just move on to another spot, maybe an eighth of an inch or so forward, but we still have not obstructed the hook shank. Now, if I made these fibers longer, then yes, indeed, they could come down and cover the hook point. If I wanted longer fibers, then the thing to do is use a wider gape hook. Then I can make the fibers longer, I can make the body of the fly deeper. So if I want a big fat fly, or a saltwater version of this fly, then it's just a matter of using a hook that has a wider gape to accept additional material. And it doesn't matter what color this material is. This is going to turn into a yellow perch, or if you're a European guy, it's going to look like a zander. Small version. Everything that swims like to eat these little guys. They're tasty to people, and they're tasty to other fish too. They just like them. In ponds here on my native Cape Cod, it's one of the prime forage fishes, and everything eats them. Well, let's do that same thing all over again. We'll make a couple of applications of material. And we continue on. Still no more obstruction of the hook shank than we had before. Come forward a little bit more. We'll just take this little short piece and fold it over instead of putting it on twice. It's another way to accomplish the same thing. Loose loop all the way around. We got a little bump here of stuff that we can deem as extra. We'll just cut that right off. Get a little more. Notice don't have to be very neat constructing this fly at all. You can just kind of add stuff on, because the final determination of what kind of bait fish this is only partially determined by the color. It's also determined by how much material you put on and the placement of it. And you'll see that as we go along. So far, we just keep repeating the same old stuff. Now you can see a few fibers down here about to where the hook point is, but nothing that's going to interfere with hooking ability. The body's gotten wider because I've let this material become longer. Now let's start shortening up again. We'll take a bit of material around the hook shank, get right up to that bead, and then get in front of the bead, then lengthen out a bit. Okay, I've left that extra material on top, over the top of the bead, obscures it, and we pull back the material I just tied in front. Now the bead is visible only from the bottom. I've obscured it from the top, so bottom and sides a little bit, it's still visible. We're going to make that disappear, and we're going to do it now. That bead will make the fly dive. It'll help keep it near bottom if that's what you want to happen, and you can certainly omit it. I'm going to turn this upside down, and I'm going to put in the material right here on the bottom. I'm going to remove excess but leave some material, and then I'm going to double up on the material in front here. So I have the eye of the hook right at the point where I have finished the material. I can come back up and over and just pull all of this back. And I now have a sort of snubby nose because I've pulled the material back and wrapped over it back here. I have not created a full head of thread, I've just created a tie-down point. And then I can tie it off nice and securely. You can see that the hook point is not obscured. There are fibers creating width up here in the front, but they're very soft. They're easily pushed out of the way, and when I add some UV varnish, or Bug Bond, or whatever version of it you want to use, it's going to make the position permanently out of the way. If I start with a hook with a wider gape, obviously I can make this body all that much wider. If I decided that I didn't want to use a synthetic material, I could do it with marabou or Arctic foxtail or virtually any other soft hair that I decide to use. So, what I like to do at this point is to ensure that those wraps stay put is just add a little bit of head cement on that one wrap. And look at the fly in the round and see exactly what I've got. Now, if I control that part of the fly, I control where all these fibers are, all the way back. So if I take a little bit of UV sensitive varnish, put my fingers in place to hold everything and put a light coating of this over the area where the bead is, all the way around. And then give it a little time to cure. I've created a final shape. Yeah. With that done, I can then get prepared to add eyes. I've learned over time that using these kinds of materials, a little drop of this fast setting glue right on top of the bead will let me place the eye exactly where I want it, and it'll make sure that it stays put. And again, it doesn't matter which kind of material you've actually made the fly out of. But there we have a little personality. To make that personality more permanent, now that the material has a more final shape, we can just add a whole bunch more UV finish. One of the nice things about this stuff is that you can put it on and it really doesn't take any kind of a set until you apply light. So you can get plenty of that in place. Watch out to make sure it doesn't run too much. And then just sort of push everything where you want it. If this was done with a light olive material, you could use it to create any kind of bait fish that had those color tones. Because it's yellow, it would then look a lot like a yellow perch. European guys will notice that this looks a lot like a zander, which is the European version of a very similar fish. And you can see that the size can be controlled very easily from a number 12 freshwater hook to larger sizes to saltwater type hooks. One can mix any kind of materials, synthetic or natural. You can make varied species, or you can just very simply make something creative that has a lot of movement, like a marabou, and will easily attract the fish's attention. The whole key is movement and the ability to control the depth of the fly. Here, wider bodies dependent on wider hook gapes. This is a 1/0 saltwater hook. This is a stinger hook, very light wire, designed basically for J-hair poppers. A more traditional freshwater hook. All of these sizes could be used in freshwater. All of them could be used in salt water. The only problem with the bronze hook is rust. But all very versatile. Detailing to create a finished fly appearance is as simple as permanent markers. You can just add a bit of color. A few stripes. Trying not to be too precise about solid and bold, because you want to create an illusion. You can add gills. You'll find that very near surface, a lot of this detail might be discernible. As you go deeper, shiny lateral lines or other very bright, shiny markings become almost black or gray. The only thing that stands out really is the eye. That is distinct down to fairly deep water. And it's the contrast between the outer part of the eye and the inner part of the eye in such close proximity with a reflective background makes it visible. The rest of it is the shape of the bait fish, governed by the length of the material that you allow to impinge or not impinge on the hook. Virtually unlimited in the types of bait fish you can imitate simply by changing colors and adding details with varied markers. A perch, here a little bit of olive on the top, and a basic saltwater or general purpose freshwater bait fish in sizes that will work in both fresh and saltwater. Like to see your inventions. Let me know what you can come up with.